Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really detailed and, frankly, quite astonishing document,
We are. It's a legal complaint filed by Union Mutual Fire Insurance Company.
filed just recently, May 12th, 2025, in the Eastern District of New York.
And this isn't your, typical insurance dispute. Not at all.
No.
What we have here is this really comprehensive legal filing. It lays out allegations of a significant orchestrated effort to defraud insurance companies.
So our main source today is this complaint itself.
Exactly, which details this complex web of allegedly fraudulent actions.
Right. And our job today is to really dig into the heart of these accusations.
Yeah.
We want to pull out the key claims about this supposed widespread operation.
Staged accidents, unnecessary medical stuff, this whole network.
Yeah, understanding the alleged mechanics, who the players are, how it all supposedly connected.
So the complaint describes what it calls the central fraud scheme.
Okay.
And the alleged method is pretty bold, setting up or just inventing accidents.
Like slip and falls.
Initially, yeah, that was the focus, it seems. But the complaint details how it evolved to include motor vehicle accidents later on, too.
And then after the supposed accident.
The next step, allegedly, was arranging what the complaint calls unnecessary medical treatment for these people, and then, predictably, filing lawsuits against insurance companies.
And the scale mentioned is, well, it's big.
It is. The complaint specifically points out the Subin firm's own tagline, over $3 billion recovered.
Right. And it asks us to think about that number compared to other big fraud
It
cases.
definitely sets a serious tone.
It really does. Okay, so let's unpack this. Where does the complaint say this whole alleged scheme started? Who's at the center?
Well, the complaint is very clear on that. It identifies the Subin firm, specifically Subin Associates, LLP, but also related entities like Subin Associates, LLC, Subin, LLP.
Okay, so variations on the name.
Exactly. And Eric Subin, PLLC. They're described as the core, the nucleus of this alleged operation.
And names individuals.
Yes, Herbert S. Subin, the managing partner, and Eric Subin, a senior partner. They're named as key figures.
You mentioned different legal structures, LLP, LLC. Does that matter much here?
Well, they're different business types, impacting liability and such, but the complaint suggests they pretty much function as one unified entity in this alleged scheme.
Okay, so it wasn't just filing lawsuits. What else was the Subin firm allegedly doing?
Oh, much more. According to the complaint, their alleged role was far-reaching. They're accused of using runners.
People who recruit claimants.
Precisely. Individuals actively finding people to participate. They also allegedly set up funding for claimants and arranged this unnecessary medical treatment.
Right.
And then, yes, they were driving the lawsuits that followed.
So it sounds like a whole ecosystem allegedly built around them.
That's the picture painted.
The complaint mentions a specific place, too, the 14th floor support services office. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, the complaint really emphasizes that location. It apparently housed a whole bunch of these related entities. J. Hernandez Associates Jr., Inc., Wall Street Transportation Services, Inc., others too. The clustering, the complaint argues, points to a kind of central hub for the whole operation.
Suggests it wasn't just coincidence they were all there.
That seems to be the implication, yes.
And one name, Jose Hernandez, keeps coming up with these Wall Street businesses. What's his alleged role?
So the complaint says Hernandez wore multiple hats. He was supposedly a manager at the Subin firm,
Oh, yeah.
while also owning Hernandez Associates and these other Wall Street companies, all working out of that 14th floor office.
Wow.
And it even notes that some of his relatives worked for Subin too, so it really paints him as central to this interconnected structure they're alleging.
It gets even more complex with Clayam Evol's law firm. How does that supposedly fit in?
Well, the Evil firm, according to the complaint, also had an office in that same 14th floor suite at the Subin firm. The allegation is that it basically acted as an extension of Subin, a way to get around potential conflicts of interest, maybe, and to obscure referrals that were allegedly going to runners and other non-lawyers.
Oh, like a buffer, maybe?
Yeah,
Creating some distance.
could be. A degree of separation, perhaps.
And then there's the law offices of Gary S. Park, PC. Another legal player.
Yes, the complaint suggests the park defendants allegedly helped facilitate, enabled, and gave significant assistance to what they call the predicate act conduct.
Predicate acts, meaning the underlying fraudulent actions.
Essentially, yes, the core activities that make up the bigger alleged fraud scheme. So maybe not as central as Subin is alleged to be, but playing a supporting role.
Okay, so we have the alleged legal hub. But how did they actually get the people, the claimants, involved in these supposed accidents? That's where the runner defendants come in.
Exactly. That's the next layer. The complaint introduces these runner defendants alleged to have actively recruited people to either stage accidents or, just make them up entirely.
And J. Hernandez Associates Jr., Inc. comes up again here.
It does. Identified as providing legal support services to Subin and employing these formalized runners. Think of them as the street-level recruiters for the scheme, allegedly.
And one name seems to jump out as a key recruiter, Jorge Lupi.
Yes, Jorge Lupi, also known as Jorge Gonzalez Lupi. The complaint describes him as a convicted felon
Okay.
and alleges that for over a decade, his main job was generating these willing claimants for the fraud scheme. Allegedly through illegal kickbacks, bribes, money laundering, reinvesting the proceeds to, keep the operation growing.
And the complaint mentions him targeting specific groups.
Yes, that's a pretty disturbing detail. It specifically alleges Lupi went after vulnerable immigrants, people struggling with addiction, the homeless.
People who might be easier to convince.
People perhaps more susceptible to offers of quick cash or future payouts in return for participating. The complaint gives examples of alleged exploitation.
And Lupi apparently rebranded his operations, a medico-legal.
That's right. The complaint says in 2020 he rebranded as a medico-legal LLC and some related entities.
But the same alleged business model.
Pretty much, according to the complaint, generating and brokering willing claimants. It suggests he kept recruiting through social media, Spanish language papers, even hosting concerts and events.
Wow. So the methods changed, maybe, but the alleged goal didn't.
That seems to be the argument.
And we also see people allegedly working for both the runners and the Subin firm, like Danny Batista and Alan Martinez.
Yeah, the complaint highlights that alleged overlap. Danny Batista supposedly worked for both Hernandez Associates and Subin firm runner, investigator, legal assistant.
Okay.
And Alan Martinez, allegedly a manager at Hernandez Associates, but also using Subin firm contact info. The complaint notes Martinez supposedly used the Evol firm, that other law firm, when bringing in her own roommate as a claimant.
Which seems to support that idea of Evol being used as a buffer.
It fits that narrative, yes.
Then there's Medical Exam Guardians, Inc.
Yeah.
And Geraldine DeLeon. What's their alleged role?
Medical exam guardians allegedly provided guardians people to go with claimants to independent medical exams, IMEs, and provide their own reports.
Okay.
And Geraldine DeLeon allegedly worked for medical guardians while also being Subin firm's operations lead.
Again, that overlap.
Exactly, highlighting the alleged interconnectedness. The complaint even mentions her brother notarizing documents for both Subin and Novello. It really paints a picture of, very close relationships across these different parts.
It sounds incredibly coordinated if these allegations hold up. Now, the money. Where did the cash come from to fund all this? The funding defendants.
Correct. That's the next piece. The funding defendants allegedly provided the financial fuel for the whole thing.
For the lawyers, the runners, the claimants.
Even the medical providers, yeah. Allegedly supplied funds to keep all these parts moving. Think of them as the financial engine.
And Sahiwal Associates, Inc., and Tanvir Chaudhry, they're mentioned prominently.
Yes. Chaudhry is alleged to own Sahiwal and to have played a role in managing runner networks, like Lupi's, and also in allegedly laundering proceeds to pay the runners and claimants. It also links him to Top Law Capital, Inc., which apparently showed up in Subin's marketing materials.
The complaint also gets into alleged wire fraud involving Gregory Alefterakis and Chaudhry. What was that about?
It outlines specific examples where Alefterakis, through his company PSC Liaisons, and Chaudhry, through Tri-State Medical Liaison Services, allegedly transferred funds in a, misrepresented and fraudulent way. The suggestion is these transfers were, at least partly, payment for Chaudhry's role in the alleged scheme.
And there's mention of political contributions from Alefterakis' companies. Why include that?
The complaint suggests these contributions were an attempt to, build political influence, to help the alleged fraud scheme and maybe shield it from scrutiny. It connects these donations to the use of what it claims were fraudulently obtained funds.
Interesting. We also see other funding entities listed. Corona 55 Funds, Wall Street Case of Dances, others, similar connections?
Allegedly, yes. Connections back to Hernandez and Alefterakis. The complaint points out shared addresses, sometimes missing required filings for these companies, suggesting a lack of transparency, maybe trying to hide the money flow.
And Wall Street Check Cashing, Inc. Its location near Subin firm is noted.
Yeah, the complaint highlights the close proximity and its unregistered status. It suggests this made it easier to hand out cash, maybe from litigation funding, without leaving a clear paper trail like checks would.
The complaint also talks about portfolio and firm funding. Can you break that down? How did that allegedly incentivize things?
Sure. So portfolio or firm funding lets law firms like Subin allegedly get money up front based on the expected value of their cases, their future fees.
Like a loan against future earnings.
Exactly. And this created, according to the complaint, a double incentive. First, bring in more claimants to make the whole portfolio look bigger and more valuable.
Okay.
And second, inflate the projected settlement value of each individual case, because that directly impacts how much funding they could get right now.
So pressure to maximize both volume and value.
Precisely. A strong motivation to boost those projected earnings.
Okay, so we've got the alleged legal side, the runners, the funding, now the medical part. The medical provider defendants, the complaint alleges a pattern of unnecessary excessive treatment.
Yes, this is absolutely critical to the whole alleged scheme. A network of doctors and clinics accused of giving treatments claimants didn't need just to inflate the medical bills.
Which then inflates the insurance claim value.
Exactly.
And Best Billing and Collection, Inc. positioned as central to this medical network.
The complaint identifies it as a key billing entity for many of the medical providers allegedly involved. Suggests a coordinated financial approach to this supposed overtreatment.
Best Care Physical Therapy and Chiropractic, PC, and Robert Sandell get a lot of attention. His alleged role.
Robert Sandell is painted as a really pivotal figure, allegedly owning or controlling several medical entities, Best Care, Maxim Orthopedics.
Maxim Orthopedics.
Yeah. The complaint suggests Maxim ran clinics with various transient providers, but Sandell was the real business owner behind it. Even used his home address for Maxim Ortho's registration, allegedly.
And these transient providers, Wiener, Carafin, others, what's significant about them?
Well, the complaint points out that some, like Dr. Kevin Wiener, allegedly had histories of professional misconduct, practicing under restrictions. It details past accusations against Wiener about unnecessary tests, excessive treatment.
And Michael Gerling, MD. Another name mentioned, along with a previous case, Geico v. Maisenberg.
Yes, Dr. Gerling is another surgical defendant named, referencing that Geico case seems intended to show an alleged history of similar schemes.
How so?
The complaint notes that in that case, it was reportedly shown that funds went from a law firm to Gerling for treating their clients through shell companies involved in illegal patient brokering. And the complaint also mentions a recent news article about Gerling doing multiple spinal fusions on a young Subin-referred patient.
Then there's McCulloch Orthopedic Surgical Services, PLLC, and Doctors McCulloch, Otero, and Capiola, also performing surgeries.
That's the allegation. Another surgical entity identified, with those doctors associated. Part of the alleged network performing surgeries the complaint argues weren't medically needed.
And Dr. Sanford R. Wirt. The complaint describes his alleged history as concerning.
It does. It highlights Dr. Wirt's alleged history of doing surgeries on patients who, reportedly, he himself had testified, weren't really good candidates for surgery. Raises serious questions about the medical judgment, allegedly.
And the complaint groups Gerling, McCulloch, Wirt, and the Galena defendants as surgical defendants. Why that grouping?
It emphasizes the allegation that these specific doctors were the ones actually doing the surgeries, a key part of the alleged fraud, driven by referrals from those initial clinics and the funding incentives.
We also need to mention Kolb Radiology PC and Dr. Thomas Kolb. Radiology fits in how?
Kolb Radiology and Dr. Kolb are identified as the go-to MRI provider for people allegedly trying to fake injuries. The complaint alleges Kolb's MRI reports often had findings like tears that independent peer reviews later disagreed with, finding only, normal degenerative stuff, suggesting the reports were tailored to support the injury claims.
The complaint also mentions the lack of strict fee oversight in no-fault insurance cases. How did that allegedly play a role?
Right. It points out that compared to systems like workers' comp, no fault has less stringent fee schedules or oversight. Meaning, allegedly, it removed a big check on excessive billing. Medical providers had more incentive to bill high and bill often because there was less chance the fees would be cut or challenged. It sort of fueled the alleged overtreatment.
Okay, the interconnectedness is becoming clearer. Now, the complaint uses specific examples, claimants A through H, to show how this allegedly worked. Let's touch on a few. Claimant A.
Claimant A, the complaint details inconsistencies. Her first complaints after a supposed fall were minimal. Then extensive treatment followed. Her primary care visit days later was for a burn, not fall injuries. Kolb's MRI allegedly showed tears. Peer review said no, just degenerative issues. But despite a history of sciatica, she got recommended for multiple spinal fusions.
Okay. And claimant B. Similar pattern.
Very similar alleged pattern, minimal initial complaints, just back pain, then treatment for a left shoulder injury not mentioned at first. Again, peer review supposedly contradicted Kolb's MRI findings of tears showing just wear and tear, suggests escalating or maybe fabricated injuries.
Claimant C seems to highlight repeat involvement.
Yes, allegedly demonstrates a pattern. Claimant C and family members, multiple injury claims, all seemingly linked to Subin. Her initial ER visit reportedly showed no obvious injury, but she got lots of treatment recommended for surgery years later. Raises questions about legitimacy, frequency.
Claimant D inconsistencies with prior medical history.
Exactly. Claimed injuries didn't match initial complaints. Peer review of Kolb's MRIs again allegedly showed chronic degenerative issues, not acute trauma. Plus, a later undisclosed accident complicated things.
Claimant E had a very detailed accident story. Maybe too detailed.
Yeah, a vivid story about a ladder falling. But the complaint points out inconsistencies in the narrative, the treatment timeline, and he later showed up as a defendant in a separate case about alleged staged car accidents. Casts doubt.
Claimant F allegedly shows quick engagement with Subin and escalating complaints.
That's the picture. Initial hospital visit noted non-trauma issues. Quickly retains Subin. Complaints expand significantly. Peer review again found discrepancies with Kolb's MRIs, and oddly, repeatedly referred to as female in records from Gerling's Institute despite being male. Raises concerns about accuracy.
Claimant G is concerning due to pre-existing conditions.
Very. Claimant G had serious health issues, stage 4 cancer, yet allegedly got recommendations for major spinal surgeries despite advanced age, those conditions. Complaint also highlights alleged links between the doctors involved.
And finally, Claimant H. Inconsistent complaints, path to surgery.
Allegedly, yes. Minimal findings initially. Quickly starts PT without clear referral. Soon recommended for knee surgery. Complaint points to inconsistencies, a seemingly predetermined conclusion for surgery, even when an EMG test didn't strongly support it.
These examples really do illustrate the alleged mechanics. Now, the complaint also discusses the evolution and expansion of the scheme. What changed over time?
Well, it alleges the focus shifted more towards motor vehicle accidents, possibly because trip and falls were getting more scrutiny from insurers' authorities.
Makes sense.
It also notes new Subin-related companies formed in late 2024 and increased advertising by Lupiza Medico Justicia operations, expanding into other states, suggests an effort to grow the alleged scheme's reach.
And even when Subin dropped cases, the network allegedly kept them going.
Yeah, the complaint says many dropped Subin cases got picked up by another lawyer, Don Worley, allegedly referred by Best Case Funding. And Worley apparently hired a Medico's former office manager, suggests continuation, coordination, even when cases changed hands.
Okay, let's wrap up with the actual legal allegations. What are the main counts?
Several counts, most prominently violations of RICO, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act,
RICO.
both for conducting the enterprise through racketeering and conspiring to do so, plus common law fraud, aiding and abetting fraud, unjust enrichment, and violating a New York Consumer Protection Law, General Business Law, Section 349.
And what damages is the insurance company seeking?
Substantial financial damages. They want back the settlement money they paid on these allegedly fraudulent claims,
Makes sense.
plus their legal and investigation costs defending the lawsuits, also seeking reimbursement for payments made to the medical providers based on allegedly fraudulent reports, and increased litigation costs due to alleged stalling, and importantly, they demand a jury trial.
So, wrapping up this deep dive into this complex complaint, what are the main takeaways?
I mean, the core allegation is of a really sophisticated, long-running scheme, a whole web legal, medical, funding, support entities, all allegedly centered around the Subin firm.
With the alleged goal of defrauding insurance companies.
Right. Through staged accidents, unnecessary medical procedures, all to inflate payouts for everyone involved in the network, allegedly.
And the scale, the interconnectedness described in the complaint, it's quite something.
It really is. The sheer number of entities, people named, the detailed accounts, the decade-plus timeline, it paints a picture, according to the plaintiff, of a highly organized, extensive operation.
But, and this is crucial, we have to keep stressing, these are allegations in a legal complaint.
Absolutely vital point. The defendants haven't been found guilty of anything. They'll get their chance to respond in court.
This is just one side of the story presented in this filing. the legal process has to play out.
Precisely.
So as we finish up, here's a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. If allegations like these are eventually proven true, what are the wider implications? For the insurance industry, sure, but also for healthcare costs, for trust in the legal system, the medical system.
Yeah, what does it say about the checks and balances?
Definitely gives you a lot to think about regarding these really critical sectors. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.